Hello everyone, today we are going to be playing Varesa, and with that let's get into the games. Now, usually in the first game I would go over the characters' skills and passive talents and whatnot, but this time we are going to do it in a slightly different order. We are going to start by showcasing the game plan of the deck, and after that explain the Varesa's skills in great depth and detail as much as I can understand them myself. Now the deck you see here, rather simple. Of course, Varesa Jansen combo, they work very well together. As for the third character, there's no need to use Chevrolet. You can use Albedo, you can use Mawika, you can use Sedlali, you can use almost any character that just provides you that little bit of support. Varesa Jansen is the main combo here. I just chose Chevrolet because I thought overloads would be fun. The game plan is very simple. You start by getting Jansen's burst, follow that up with one overload from Chevrolet, and then go to Varesa. Of course, depending on how aggressive your opponent is, there's no need to go to Chevrolet at all. You can just straight up go to Varesa and start fighting from there. We're of course also using the new Noblesse Oblige 3-cost artifact, since this is actually very good, especially for Jansen. Also for some other decks, I'm sure, like rated decks probably like that artifact as well. What it does, it is basically a star signs. This card right here is basically a star signs, meaning that when you play it, your character immediately gets 1 energy. And then after you do an elemental burst, your 3 next attacks deal +1 damage. So it's very good for any like burst rush deck, like Jansen, like Raiden. I'm sure for Bennett decks as well this works very well. Especially well if you are running a weapon deck, because then there's no reason not to play Ancient Courtyard, which of course can make this artifact very cheap. Now in this scenario, because I see the possibility for it, I'm actually going to go for a double burst here. You can see we picked Providence there. We are going to play the Electro Resonance, of course burst the Jansen, but we are actually going to follow it up with a burst from Chevrolet. And this is, by the way, I want to state the reason why we are, instead of explaining the new character, I'm explaining the deck, because this match right here is the ideal maximum damage that this version of the deck can do. You see, we have Varesa's talent card, we have Chevrolet's talent card, we have Chevrolet's burst. Now with the Noblesse Oblige we have Jansen burst. This is the optimal, the best case scenario for this deck that you can achieve. You have artifacts making Varesa, I mean you can use Golden Troop, you can use Gladiators, or because we are of course using Overlords, we got something that can discard these bullets. We have the Conductor's Top Hat as well. But you get to see here, this is the best case scenario for this version of the deck. I also like to state that I did change the contents of this deck for the later matches, but this match was simply like the perfect setup. We have Jansen burst, we have Chevrolet's burst, we have talent card and Noblesse, we have Varesa's talent card. Like, I was not able to recreate such a perfect setup with my second version of this deck, even though that second version overall is a better, more consistent, more threatening version of this deck. But this is what you see right here. This is the best you can do with this deck. The damage is there, all the possible buffs that this deck can have are there. I mean, the only addition for this point would be having the Conductor's Top Hat either on Jansen or Varesa, and have that discard the overcharged balls. We of course play one here to snipe Chlorine.
Alright team, let's move it out!
And since we still have free switches, and our opponent nicely gives us a free switch as well, you can see Varesa's passive skill activates there, and even more attacks coming. Now my opponent at this stage still thinks there's something they can do to actually turn the tide, you know, but there is nothing they can do at this point. I have definitely won this match, even though I do have to say it was not especially a hard matchup. But in the coming games I will explain more about the finer details of this deck once we are finished here. Like so. Let's get on to the next match. So what you saw there in that first game was the very first Varesa deck I made. Now of course this is the same deck now that I've simply changed the cards. Some of the action cards have been changed. I believe in this version I no longer have Varesa's talent card, since it's not that great in this deck, since we are relying on Janssen's burst for extra damage, and using a weapon instead of Varesa's talent card is, in my opinion, better. I'll explain that later as to why, but this is mostly the same deck as in the first game. So, Varesa, how does she work? Well, when you look at her normal attack, you can at first you can immediately notice this. Though normal attack, this 1 electro damage. If it's a plunging attack, +1 damage, enter Night Soul Blessing, gain 1 Night Soul point. So immediately it makes it very clear with Varesa you want to do plunging attacks. Then the elemental skill. These 2 electro damage. Switch, to put it simply, there's a bunch of funny names there. You deal 2 electro damage. You gain one Night Soul point and enter Night Soul Blessing if you aren't there in that state already. You switch to the character on your right, in this case from Varesa. If you use the skill you will switch to Janssen. If Janssen is out of the game you switch to Chevreuse. If both Janssen and Chevreuse are out of the game, then you do not change characters at all. Okay? And next time when it's your turn, you automatically switch back to Varesa. So it switches you off from Varesa when you do the skill, and then back to Varesa when it once again is your turn. Okay? And lastly, the burst. This is just a plunge attack. Well, the burst is the worst part of Varesa's kit. You do 1 more damage than a plunge attack or this skill. Only 1 more damage and you get the Apex Drive. Now what is the Apex Drive? Apex Drive is basically Varesa's passive skill. When Varesa has 2 Night Soul points, she attaches Apex Drive to herself and the Night Soul Blessing state ends.
This is gonna be fun!
By the way, here you get to see we are running conductors indeed for these easy overloads, and even though we have full energy on Chevreuse, there's no need to actually go for Chevreuse burst in every scenario. But while the game continues on the background, let's quickly go over the last part of the kit, which is the Apex Drive. What is Apex Drive? When you switch, if Varesa has Apex Drive, you switch to Varesa from another character. Varesa automatically deals I believe it is... Where does it... there. Automatically deals 2 damage for free. Think of it like Kazuha's, after you do Kazuha skill, you automatically get a normal attack next time you go to Kazuha. Varesa's Apex Drive is the same. You automatically get a normal attack. Basically. That's the easiest comparison to like a pre-existing character I can make here. So, notable things about Varesa. She is made to work together with Ian-san. And to be honest, I've exactly seen 3 types of decks with Varesa that are like actually worth playing. Like they aren't complete dog shit. First one is of course Varesa Ian-san combo. These two work very well together. Second version you can play of, well, second Varesa deck you can play is simply overload decks without Ian-san, which is basically you use Mawika, Chevrolet and Varesa. That is a very good, well, I wouldn't actually call that like a different deck type, that it's just a different deck. A singular deck you can play, but Varesa overload with Chevrolet and Mawika is a good combo, even though it's basically just another version of the Lisa Chevrolet Mawika deck. Basically you just replace Lisa with Varesa. Well, not to say it isn't a good deck despite that. And the third deck, which is good for Varesa, is Albedo Plunge deck. Basically you have Albedo, you have Albedo's talent card, you have Varesa, and you have a third character, either a monster character or another like well, Ayaka for example. I actually saw Albedo Varesa Ayaka deck. I think you get to see that in my if you go to my latest video with the Nilo Hydro Tulpa Bloom deck. There we have the Albedo Varesa Ayaka Plunge deck. But basically Varesa is good in plunge decks with Ian-san or as a Lisa replacement in that one overload deck. And to be honest, I don't really think with our current characters they're like, what can you combo this with? You want to do plunge attacks. The best plunge attack helper for any team is Albedo. So there's that. What can you combo the skill with? Well, I don't know, maybe Candice Burst, you know, switch characters and you do 1 hydro damage once per round. Or actually I think you could, you know, combo this with Yao Yao's Burst as well, but that would be just one very odd combo. You could, I mean, you could try it. Take this deck and replace Chevrolet with Yao Yao and go for Yao Yao Burst. Like the burst itself, like I mentioned, this isn't worth shit. You don't do the only times you use the burst is because you need that one piece of extra damage to take out an opponent character. Though I could say, if you are into trolling your opponents, there is one thing you can actually do. And that is the fact that the Apex Drive has a couple of peculiar things about it. The Apex Drive is considered a prepare skill as well as a plunge attack as well as an elemental burst. Meaning anything that applies to prepare skills. Well, there aren't that many, but for example there's the one food card that heals when you do a prepare skill. That activates when you use Apex Drive. What else is there? Well, like I mentioned, it is considered a plunging attack, meaning Albedo's talent card buffs the damage of the Apex Drive. What else do we have? Well, the fact that it's an elemental burst means it should get damaged buffed also by Adeptus Temptation. Also, I do think by that same premises, Noblesse Oblige should activate the +3 damage if played onto Varesa, who uses the Apex Drive. I mean, if you are completely like accurate, it's the Volcano Kaplan, but it's easier to call it simply the Apex Drive, since that is what actually does things. Also, as we come to the end of the second game, I would like to quickly state the deck I'm playing, this is like, don't think this isn't my finest work, to put it simply. This is a very gimmicky, only really works very well if you get Chevrolet's burst. If you don't get Chevrolet's to burst, this deck is weak. If you don't get a weapon for Varesa, like, you have 2 rotations you can do with this deck. Always with Jansan burst, follow that up with a Chevrolet's burst or a weapon on Varesa and just Varesa skill spam. Those are the 2 rotations you can do with this deck. If you cannot do either of those, you most likely lose. For example, against Chessmaster, I actually played 3 games against this person. I won 2 times, but I did the one game where they actually... let me put it this way. At the start of this match, you can reverse the video if you want to. They aren't able to summon the Frosty Assault summon from Maku Kengi. And I do think that is the reason why they lose this game. The one match Chessmaster won against me, they were able to get Frost Assault first action, you know. But in this game and at the other game I won against Chessmaster, they weren't able to get the Frost Assault summon on the field, which is probably the biggest reason why I won both this and that match. But to put it simply, keep it in mind, this deck is not in any way like capable of winning every other deck out there. Anyway, let's get on to the next game. Now, like I mentioned previously, this deck, much like in my, Hydra Tulpa deck, I went through a couple of variations of this same deck, you know, the classic. You make your first version of the deck, you try it out, you say to yourself, these things work, these things don't work, and then you make changes according to that. Well, here at the end, I think from this game onward, there should be no changes in the deck itself, so we can look at the gameplay as you can see right here. Round 1, you want to try to do setup. Because you have Electro Resonance, because you have Noblesse Oblige, you have ways to fill up Jansen's burst immediately round 2. Like, the only thing you really want to do round 1 is 1 skill from Jansan, 2 skills if you do not have Electro Resonance or Noblesse Oblige in hand. Alright? So, you want to burst Jansan round 2. That would be the ideal scenario. Like, most of the games I've lost are either because 1, I was not able to burst Jansan round 2 for reason or another, or because I was not able to get Chevrolet's burst or a weapon for Varesa. Now, why is it actually difficult to get Chevrolet's burst with this deck? It is difficult if you are trying to keep the Jansan in Night's Soul Blessing state. Because the optimal rotation for this deck is pretty much something like burst Jansan, switch to Chevrolet's, 1 skill from Chevrolet's, you know, either a skill or a burst, depending on if you've played Resonance cards and you have Noblesse Oblige, which you can play for cheap with the Ancient Courtyard. And then when you switch back to, when you switch from Chevrolet's to Varesa, you regain 1 Night Soul point from that. After that, in order to once again keep the Night Soul Blessing state, you actually want to go for a skill instead of a normal attack. Because Varesa skill, because it does 2 switches, it doesn't actually consume or reduce the amount of Nightsoul Blessing state in total from Yansan. So the best case rotation is Yansan burst, Chevrolet's burst, skill from Varesa, normal attack from Varesa, skill from Varesa, skill, normal attack, skill, you get the Apex Drive, and usually by that point the opponent only has one character alive. That's the optimal, I'd say you aim for that scenario where you are able to do that. It's not always possible, and sometimes you have to go for Varesa instead of Chevrolet, especially like in situations like this. No energy on Chevrolet, we cannot get an overload on Xingqiu even if we went to Chevrolet, so it's better to go to Varesa, especially since we have the weapon. Now, if you go straight to Varesa, then you want to do a plunge attack first. Like so. So if you go straight from Yansan to Varesa, plunge attack, then skill. If you go from Chevrolet, then you want to do a skill first play when you go to Varesa, even though you do have the increased damage of the plunge attack. So if you go straight to Varesa, start with a plunge attack. If you go from Chevrolet to Varesa, you want to do the skill. Why? To keep Yansan in the Nightsoul Blessing state, to keep the damage buff as long as possible. But yeah, that is the rotation you want to do with this deck. One of those two. If neither of them work out, you've most likely lost the game if the opponent knows how to play the game or actually runs a deck that is good against this one.
Overruled.
There has been, for example, I don't think it was with... No, actually, yeah, I did lose with this deck too. There was just the... What is it? I think it was... Yeah, Ganyu deck, that was right. There was a Ganyu deck I lost to. Simply because I was... they were running the Ancient Battleground Arcane card, and I wasn't able to burst Yansan round 2. And that cost me the entire game. But anyway, on to the next one. Now, of course, I had to include this game since that is very much the same deck I was, well, at least the same character cards as I was playing in my Hydro Tulpa video. Go watch that if you are interested. I play that very same deck in that video. So yeah, that is the biggest reason why I had to include this game. I thought it was very funny. But yeah, at this stage I think I've kind of said everything I want to say about the deck. I mean, if I were to list out some weaknesses of the deck, firstly, we don't really have any healing. I mean, yeah, Yansan's passive skill can kind of heal, but since you are always using that for extra damage, you don't really heal. Yeah, Chevrolet can kind of heal if you discard an overcharged ball, but that's also very minimal. So the biggest healing or protection cards we have the Fire and War Resonance Natlan Resonance card. Works out in some scenarios, but often only makes it so that your opponent has to do one more skill to win the game. But in some scenarios it actually does clutch the game. Second one is of course Mystic Soup. It can provide you a little bit of extra healing or protection, but outside of that, this deck doesn't really have anything. So if your opponent is playing like high damage decks, you often the only way you can win against high damage decks is to deal bigger damage than the opponent. You know, kill the opponent faster than they can kill you, type of stuff.
Are we going on a trip? Or to a competition?
Also in this game, in certain matchups, there's no need to actually keep Varesa alive, even though this is a Varesa deck. As you can see right here, we have all of our equipment on Yansan and Chevrolet. there's no need to keep Varesa alive for any real reason. So we sacrifice Varesa here to the summons. After all, Chevres and Jansan are perfectly capable of finishing this game off by themselves. But yeah, this deck very demanding, like I mentioned earlier. Like you really want to burst Chevres if you have the possibility to do it. If you do not, then you really want to have a weapon for Varesa, because actually now that even though Varesa is out of the game, I can quickly mention why a weapon on Varesa is actually very good. And it is because Varesa's skills, the plunge attack 2 damage, skill 2 damage. If increased only by Jansan's burst, they do 4 damage. 4 damage is not enough in, well, 2 hits that both do 4 damage is not enough to take out a 10 HP character. But if you have a weapon, it increases both of the attacks by 1, which means you do 10 damage with Jansan burst, and that's enough to take down a 10 HP character. Anyway, let's get into the last game of today. Now, for our last game, we have quite the stall deck from our opponent, and here's actually something I've in my next video I'm going to be, once we get over this all, in my next video I'm going to be playing Aoife, and there's something I want to say Aoife right here and right now. He really needs to get nerfed. The amount of healing and damage the technique can, well, to put it simply, if you only sit on Aoife, you can survive almost anything. Especially with the talent card. Especially if you have maidens equipped. The amount of healing Aoife provides, it is simply kind of ridiculous. I mean, I guess I can quickly, let's put that. So I can quickly go over why Aoife is very freaking stupid. I'm not going to get into too much detail because it's going to be the next video playing Aoife, but what it does, your elemental skill 1 and Nemo damage, you get the technique. Very much like other, well, most other Natlan characters. What is the technique? Deal 1 and Nemo damage to the opponent's, how should I put this, character on the left side of the active character. In this case, if they had Aoife with the technique, it would now attack Varesa.
Stronger.
Okay, so left of the opponent's active character is where this technique will deal 1 anemo damage and heal the character that has taken most damage for 2 HP. So, why is this broken, you may ask? Firstly, the skill costs 2 anemo die. The technique, where does it say? It doesn't say here, but the technique costs, actually I think we get to see it here soon, but the technique costs 2 unaligned dice. Okay, why is this all a problem? That you still haven't explained why this is very broken. Where? Well, let me now go over it. You deal 1 damage and heal 2 HP. Most characters in the game, unfortunately in this match there's a single, well, the standard skill from any character deals 3 damage and heals nothing. Basically, the basic skill of a character, it is 3 damage and that's it. If we compare that to Aoife, instead of 3 damage you do 1 damage and heal 2 HP. Okay? And if we count, because the skill is 2 dice, the technique is 2 dice and you can activate it twice, for a total of 6 dice, you can do 3 damage and heal 4 HP. What is the standard character who can do whose skill costs 3 dice and in most cases the skill does 3 damage. For 6 dice you can do 6 damage. So if you immediately count it, Aoife with the same amount of dice, okay, only does 3 damage, but heals 4. So instead of the total value, you know, with 3 damage skills, the total value is 6. You know, 3 plus 3 damage, you do a total of 6 damage. With Aoife, you do 3 damage and heal 4. So the total is 7. So in any one-on-one scenario where there's no external like weapons or burst effects or skill effects as play, there's only like, I don't know, catching against Aoife, one-on-one scenario, Aoife always wins. Because in every scenario, Aoife gains plus 1 HP in every interaction against the, well, you know, skill against skill scenario. And that is simply just stupid. The amount Aoife heals is more than you can do damage, you know, by standard. The amount of damage you can do against Aoife is less than Aoife can heal. Like, not to mention the burst heals, the talent card gives heals. If you have maidens or anything, the amount of heals Aoife provides is simply far too much. And we, like, honestly, either give Aoife the Kachina treatment that the technique costs a Nemo dice as well, or just reduce the amount of healing this technique gives. Like, it's simply too much. I honestly think in this match, like, the only reason why my opponent didn't win is simply because they didn't use Aoife to heal their entire team continuously. Because with this deck I have, well, not only with this deck, with even another Janssen deck, I have lost against guys who basically do nothing but spam Aoife skills. Because the amount of healing, even with Janssen Burst, the amount of healing, if you have, like mentioned, you only need 6 dice to heal 4 HP. Top of, like, if you have maidens, you heal a total of 6 HP. If you have talent card and maidens, you can heal 8 HP in one round. Top that off with like any other food cards and arcanes or whatever you can use to protect Aoife, and you simply, it's not enough. Nothing seems to be enough. The only way, like only reliable way to take out Aoife is to basically have like Hu Tao Burst with Adeptus and whatnot to one-shot Aoife. Like, if my opponent had done this earlier in the game, they most likely would have won this match. But yeah, this is already, by the way, a spoiler, because I spent there yapping quite much. This video is once again going to be a little longer than I like. I'm trying to keep this at the half an hour mark, these explanation videos, but we've once again crossed over it, so we are just going to speed through the rest of the game. But like you see there, the talent card activates at any electro charged reaction, even at their side of, well, of course, even at their side of the field, when their active character triggers. What does it say? It's on the field and yeah, you trigger, so the active character has to trigger an electro charged or a Nemo reaction. But yeah, to put it simply, the amount of healing from Aoife is simply just very stupid, and to be honest, I could very well just do an Aoife deck that is I don't know, title it the unkillable Aoife, and just basically have healing cards and protection cards and do nothing but spam skills from Aoife and win games like that. Because that has actually happened to me. Like, I've run into a guy who did nothing but spam Aoife skills, and they won the game with that. Because even though I didn't mention it previously when I explained Aoife skills, In a one-on-one scenario, Ifa always comes out on top. But of course, one-on-one scenarios are only at the end of the game. Most of the time your opponent has 3 characters alive. And in that case, the swirl damage from Ifa means that the one-on-one scenario with a single target damage dealer like Genshin, who only spams skills against Ifa. Do you know what happens? The answer is Ifa gets even more value. Because now instead of using or dealing damage to only one target and dealing only 3 damage in total with the skill plus 2 techniques, there's the swirl damage, and if we, for whatever reason, let's assume you get a swirl with each of the, with the skill and both of the techniques, let's assume you get a swirl, your damage per round increases by 6 because of the swirls. And at that point it becomes apparent why Ifa is very stupid. I mean, honestly, I do think Ifa is... he needs a nerf. It's simply too ridiculous how much healing this character can provide, and I think simply because now I've spent too much time talking about Ifa, my next video is simply going to be a practically unkillable Ifa deck. Like if the opponent isn't running a Hu Tao burst deck that can one-shot, the character.
Sorry.
But anyway, that's going to be all for today. I'll see you all in the next video.